Hello. We're back with a wintertime painting, a snow scene. And so go through this drawing here. Really the whole design's based on this stream. And there are a few things. The photo's fairly complicated, but there's a few things that I made some adjustments with. One was this tree. I did not like that heavy tree leaning in, so I just sort of made my own grouping there. I also did not put the smaller tree in the bottom right. I didn't think it was really necessary to break it up there. The drawing, for me, it's not real detailed the way the photo is. I didn't take a huge amount of time and go in there and put in every shape and value change. Your drawing is going to be, your painting is a product of the drawing, and so this drawing, I had an idea of what I wanted as far as how developed the painting is going to be, and so that really dictates the drawing. I want to get enough information in. I want to be specific about the shapes, and the other key is making sure that there's good value to the drawing, meaning that the certain lines that I really need to pay attention to are dark enough that I'm not going to lose it. It's important that in a watercolor drawing that you have different values of line, and that some of the lines are suggestions and they're lightly put in there. Other ones are like orders, like you're going to really stick to this line. You're going to paint up to it or paint around it. And so that's when I'm doing a drawing, that's what I'm shooting for, is like, am I specific enough? Do I have enough information? I don't want to short the drawing, but I also don't want to put in so much extraneous stuff that it's, just makes confusion for me. And so there's so much detail, especially in the woods, that I knew I was just going to be doing suggested brushwork. And so notice that some areas don't have hardly any drawing, and that's with the idea that I would just be going in there with the brush and filling those in. So the painting starts and pretty much follows through with this basic palette, which is just a split primary. So cobalt blue becomes a big player because there's so many snow shadows. All the warms are mostly quin red and gamboge with a little bit of Hansa, sometimes a little bit of pyrrole scarlet. The earth tones are just used for the darker values that are in the painting, Van Dyke brown and quin sienna. And so the beginning of this painting really is just one big wet into wet wash. And so I made sure that I thoroughly, this is obviously sped up, but that I thoroughly wet that paper, because I want to have myself a very consistent surface and also have a lot of time to do this. What this does is it most of this scene is in shadow, and so having big washes covering the area, the cobalt blues and things, ties everything together really nicely. And I don't get all these little floaty white shapes between forms. Not that you couldn't do this on a dry sheet, it's just that this seems to work for me pretty well. These are the two main mixes that are in there, plenty, which is that quin red and gamboge, and then quin red and cobalt blue, which gives you that sort of violet cast. And so you can see this is sped up, but there, I did have a lot of time because I really soaked the paper. That's manganese blue. You can see the difference in the temperature there. And so, one of the keys with wet into wet is making sure that you get it dark enough, that you get enough color in there, because you're painting into essentially water, and so it's going to dry a lot lighter. And so, I made sure that these were pretty juicy washes, knowing that I'm going to lose some value. And there's a lot, you can get a lot done doing it this way, where you start really wet. So it becomes this painting, there's a lot of repeated washes, the same mixes over and over. So again, this is the quin red and gamboge. And with that, sometimes there's more quin red, sometimes there's more gamboge. I mean, it's a very simple mix, but there's variety within that. Where there's shadows on this lit side, it's the inclusion of cobalt blue, and so that's what the inset shows there. And it's still wet, and so I like that because then that gives me a softer edge, and it kind of blossomed out a little bit, which I actually like. You know, I like that effect that it left. That's ultramarine blue. You can see that definitely the difference there in value. And then wherever that ultramarine turns a little violet, it's just the inclusion of Quin red. And so again, it's these repeated, it's a very simple mixes. And I try to, early on in a painting, keep the colors pretty fresh. You don't want to gray down color. You don't want to reach for your earth tones early on. I'm very careful about using, earth tones because they tend to muddy things up, obviously. And so the sunlight, especially sunlight effects or real clean shadows, those should be done early so that you can see the color come out, and you don't sneak up on them. You put that color in, and you can always gray things down later, but you can't say that if you're really conservative and you're afraid of putting too strong a color, it's, by the time you get to the color, it'll be too late. So the paints that I showed you that I'm using on this, I had big puddles of different mixes all over my palette, and I kept them going and just sort of organically let things happen on the palette as I'm mixing. Eventually it gets too congested and the colors start getting muddy, and then I'd clean that palette off and start with another fresh batch of mixes. The darker values, it's the only time I've used phthalo in this painting, and so phthalo and Quin sienna make a real earthy green, which is nice. And the real dark, it almost looks like black, is Van Dyke brown and ultramarine. So you can see in the photo, it's a very complex background. So I'm winging it here. I'm just trying to come up with some calligraphy, mark making that sort of suggests trees with snow on the branches. And it certainly helps that I've painted this type of scene before, but it's just guesswork on my part that, okay, this will kind of look like that. I didn't draw anything back there. In between those trees, there was no drawing. So that's what I said early on. I'm just going to use the brush, go in there and, try to come up with some marks that feel like that busyness that's back there. And at the same time, it's a lot of reverse painting. So some of those trees where the light's hitting, I'm trying to work around that. My main brush for this type of painting, this type of mark making, is a size 12 black velvet, which is a blend, squirrel hair blend. And it makes these beautiful calligraphic marks, very expressive, but you still have a lot of control. And so there's the ultramarine Van Dyke brown mix. It's that kind of that darker, almost blackish gray. Adding a little Quin red gives you a kind of a knockdown violet. That's what that color is. And so, I'm spending, enough time to try to get some complexity back there and get that light effect. I really liked how that shadow just sort of crept in across the snow and just caught the bottom of that line of trees. So as I'm working, you'll see that as the video goes on, you're going to see something happen that's not too great for the video, and that is I took a break while I was painting it, and when I came back, I forgot to turn the camera on. I only thought that I missed a small section of the painting. Turns out I missed the water. So you'll see as we go through here, the water is suddenly going to appear. I almost didn't even bother making the video, but there's a lot of things here that I think are, worked out. I like the painting, so I thought, well, there it is. See, it just sort of appears, and I even missed the shadows on on the snow, which are just cobalt blue, and maybe with a little bit of quin red. But the water looks like a big wet into wet. It wasn't. It was painted on dry paper, but with a 3/4 inch flat, really loaded with these colors. And I just kept pushing those colors in, pushing them in, till eventually the water is essentially a big wet into wet area. And so so I apologize for that. I wish I could have showed you that process. I painted this painting. I did a video of this earlier in the week, and it was okay, but I didn't like the water, so I said I'm going to do it again. And of course, then this time I didn't even record the water, so kind of frustrating. But once that water gets in, I want you to notice, look how light the snow is. Like, you know, when we were first on there with just a river of white paper between it, and the snow shadows looked really dark. Everything's relative with value. So, and that's what makes watercolor difficult, because we're always working on white paper. So every time we put a wash down, it looks darker than it really is. And so sometimes you just have to be patient when you're doing that, and get in, wait for that next adjoining shape to get put in, and then you can make a better value judgment. The details are, that's just a little Velvet Touch synthetic brush that I put in most of the limbs with and stuff. There's a limit to how many of those I'm going to put in, just enough to give it energy and to show specificness. And that's such an important part, that if you're doing a landscape, the shape of a tree, the shape of a shadow, those are all very specific, so you don't want to cut too many corners there. I probably could have done a really super detailed drawing and use some masking fluid for some of the snow that was on top of the limbs and things like that, but that was never the plan for this painting. And so I decided early on that I was going to use a little bit of white gouache just to highlight a few of those limbs. And I don't use Chinese white, I use white, titanium white gouache, which is, I think it's Da Vinci. And in this case, it's a mixture of fresh gouache put on the palette, and then I mix in some cobalt blue, and that sort of gives the the impression of light on top, or snow on top of the limbs. The one area that I knew I definitely was going to do it from the very beginning of the painting was where those branches stick out into the water. Right there, I think I like those shapes just coming in there, so that was definitely always going to be the plan. And just a few of these. I'm not a purist. I usually always have a little bit of opaque in there, but these are the last touches, and so there's the painting. So I appreciate you guys tuning in and watching it. Hope you got something out of it. Please subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you again sometime. Thanks.